Hey everybody, how's it going? So in this video we're going to continue with animations, and from the previous video we looked at transitions from a high level, and we did a few things such as creating transitions for entering your component into a screen and also leaving a screen, and some changes between different states and things like that. The one thing I wanted to talk about in the previous video and decided to cut it short was the kind of animations we can perform with transitions. So that's what we're going to be looking at in this video. And the sample I thought of to do, and it'll probably take about 20, maybe 30 minutes, is to build a login form that when you don't fill it in like you intend to, it will shake at you and say, as in to say, you haven't filled everything in. And if it does successfully fill everything in, then what we'll do is we'll make it just slide off the screen, okay? And that will be the end of pretty much what we're going to do for the video. And then in the next video, we'll try and add some routes into this as well. But we'll just keep it one step at a time. So, I'm going to come over to the code, and I'm going to build this login form that I want, okay? So there's going to be a little bit of HTML and CSS involved first to get this up and going. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to build a section. This section is going to contain my login little screen, which will be centralized in the middle of our web document. So I'm going to add a header, like so, and we'll add a H1 in here, and this will just say login, like so, no major deal here. And then under here, I'm going to create a form, and inside this form, I'm going to have a few things. So we'll go to label for, and we'll say username, and then username we'll type here, and we'll go to label. Next thing we'll have is an input, type equals text, ID equals username, name equals username, and energy model is equal to, yes, you guessed it, username. So nothing special there. We're going to make this field required, though technically I think for this video I'm going to leave validation out of discussion, though technically you should be using validation to ensure that things are filled in. But I just want to keep this very simple and lightweight, and so we don't have to worry about so many things. So next we have another label for the password, and we'll put password here, whoops, and then another input. This one will be a password field. ID is obviously password, name is password, and we're going to bound it by ng model to password. So nothing too particularly dangerous here so far. And then as a final step, I'll have a button, and we'll just say login. Okay. Now for the form, I'm going to create an event on it, which will essentially just go ng submit, and we'll go on submit, like that. So we need to add a few things to the component now. First thing we need is a username of type string, then we need a password of type string, and then I need a function which I called on submit, like so. Now, whoops, I'm going to quickly do some CSS for this, because as you can see right now, it doesn't look overly nice, and we can't really see where the component starts and ends. So let's do some CSS for this. I'm going to come down to my main style sheet here, and I'm just going to quickly add some body to this, and we'll add a background, a background of, let's say, hash, what do I want to call it, 247 maybe, or 217, 217 will do. It'll give me a bit of a dark blue color. Now we still can't see where the component starts and ends, but we've got a bit of a dark blue interface. So we'll come up now to the styles for the component, And because I only have one section, I'm going to select it for section. I'm going to give it a background of white. So that should give me an idea now of where the component starts and ends. There it is right there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to centralize this component in a fixed position. So the position fixed. We'll set the width of this to 50% of the screen. We're going to set the left to 25% of the screen, the top to 25% of the screen. So that should put it somewhere in the middle. Let's have a look. Sort of, not really, but I think that's good enough for what we're interested in doing. Now I just need to add a few more things. So let's add some padding on this. And I'll just throw 20 pixels all the way around. So that should give us some spacing, and that looks not great, but it's a little bit better. So next thing I want to do is I want to align the heading to the center. So let's do that. Because I want to say login right in the center of the screen here, which is good. And then finally, I want to make the labels and the inputs, I'm going to make them block elements here. So they're all on individual lines. So let's just quickly check that. Cool, so it's starting to look a little bit more like a form, but not quite there yet. With the input, I'm going to make it fill most of the screen, so we'll go 96%. And the reason why I'm going 96% is because I want to have a padding of 2% and 2%. So 2% top and bottom, 2% left and right. So by rights, that should give us a little bit of padding now. And that looks pretty good. Now we just need to add some margin to some of these things. So next, I'm going to give it a margin bottom of, let's say, 4 pixels. Cool. And what else do we want to add here? What's this border I don't like all this much, so let's just add a little bit of border here. So we'll go border is equal to 1 pixel solid. We'll go a black color, but I'll use RGBA value here, so 0, 0, 0, and we'll go 0.4. So it's a little bit of a fadey black color, but I also want to give it a border radius. I don't like those square borders, so we'll just add 5 pixels to it. And now we're starting to look a little bit better. So we're nearly there. But I don't like the button at the bottom. I want to fix that button very quickly. So, what do we want to do with the button? Let's think. So we've got a button. I'm going to put display a block on it as well. I'm going to give it a centralized margin, so 0 auto. We'll go margin top though, and we'll add 8 pixels, something like that. We'll give it a width, just make it a little bit wider. We'll make it 30% wide. Oops. Use percentage, not hashes. And lastly, we'll give it a little bit more height of 32 pixels. And I think this is pretty much where I want to be. I think that's good enough for the purpose of this demonstration. So, now that we've done that, what I want to do now is I want to animate this thing so that when I, for example, don't put in the right values and I submit the form, I want it to shake. Now, actually, I'll come back a step. When it's valid, I want it to come off the screen, right? Off to the right-hand side, and we don't see it anymore, and we have to basically come in here and refresh to see it again. Let's go with that step first, because that'll allow me to talk a little bit about animation. So, coming over to the code now. So now we're on submit. I'm just going to handle the positive case to start off with, and then we'll handle the negative case. So what I need to do is I'm going to create some animations, because that's what we're here for, right? Animation. Not animation, sorry. I need trigger, I need state, I need transition. I basically did all these: style, animate, and I will leave keyframes out for just a minute. So now when I come in, I'm going to create animations. Alright, we're going to call the trigger function, and on this trigger function I'm going to call it login screen animation, like so. And then we're going to have an array of states and transitions in this trigger. So the first state I want to have is something called the invalid state. And for the invalid state, we're not going to be actually changing any CSS properties, because we're going to be using keyframes to do this for us. So as a result of that, I'm just going to specify a blank style here and move on. For unchecked, which is what I'm going to start off with, this will be when you first get to the page. Again, we don't need to really do anything here, because the CSS is already specified the way we want it. When it's unchecked, we want it to look like this. So we don't need to add anything new. So I'm going to skip that as well. But we're going to use these states in order to specify transitions. So that's why I'm specifying the states right now. Last one is completed. And once again, for this one, we are going to specify a style. And we're going to basically specify the end state of completed, which is to be translated off the screen. So the end result will be a transform of a translate X, which I believe is 150% off the screen, based on what I remember when I did this the first time. Right? So that will completely move this full component off the screen. Now, before I move on, I'm going to actually set up this login screen animation to the component. So we've seen this before. So just come up here, we add the little ampersand symbol, and then we do this, and I'm going to set it to a property. Right? And the property I'm just going to say is exactly the same. So I now need to create this property. So down here, I'm going to set it as a string, and I'm going to default it to unchecked, because we haven't done anything on the form yet. Now this unchecked thing will become very important once we get to the shaking animation. You will have to set it back to unchecked when it's invalid, but I'll get to that when I get to it. First, we want to do the completed state. So the next thing we need to do is we need to specify the transition for completed. So let's do that. So transition. And now we're going to go from an unchecked state to a completed state. And then when this happens, we're going to animate something. Okay? Now we've got our animation already specified here. So from unchecked, nothing's going to change to the screen. However, when we go completed, we're going to transform and go complete off the screen, and it's going to stay that way. So there's no styling we need to apply here. We just need to specify a duration. Now, I just wanted to quickly talk about this animate function a little bit more, because in the previous video, I may have indicated that you can do something like, we'll just say 500, for example. All right, that's 500 milliseconds. What you can also do is I can go 500 milliseconds. That's the same thing. We can do 0.5 seconds, and they're all the same durations, right? Now, if we want to add a delay, we can do that as well. That's usually inside of this string a second parameter which is separated by a space, right? So here it's 0.5 seconds and then 100 millisecond delay, right? And then finally we can do this thing called an easing. Now I'm going to talk about easing in a second. I need to open up a specific web page to show you exactly how these work. But let's just get this working first. So what I'm going to do is going to come back to the 500 millisecond duration and just dump that for now. And in this on submit, I'm not going to put in any extra major work here. I'm just going to go this dot login screen animation equals completed. Right, and save. And now when I come back to my code and I refresh, no matter what we do here, if I click login, that's interesting. That should have gone off the screen. So what have I done wrong here? Am I not calling it on submit? Okay, let's see if that's getting called first. Alright, log in, on submit is getting called, and I'm not sure what happened there. Maybe it's just that this ng serve wasn't up to date because now it's working. So once again, I'll remove the console log because what I wrote was actually correct. I'll let it catch up a little bit. So if I click now, it goes off screen and we can't see it anymore. Alright, so now that we've gotten this far, what I want to talk about now is this animate function. So as I said before, we can come in here and we can set this to 500 milliseconds and we can add a delay. So just say we're going to add 1000 millisecond delay, watch what happens. So if I come in and I click this, doesn't do anything for a second, and then it disappears, or starts to animate. So this is known as a delay, this is known as the duration, and it's all inside a single string like this. The other thing you can do is you can specify what's referred to as an easing, and there's a number of different variations of this, and I'll basically go to a web page in a minute that explains all these different easings. So if I now come in here and I save, this will also work. Now you're probably not going to see the easing all that much because of how quickly things move. So what I might do is I'll translate it only 50% across the screen and I'll increase the duration. Right? When we increase the duration, you might see what this ease is trying to do. So we come back over, I click login. So it doesn't, see how it starts to slow up at the end there and then it stops. So that's what easy is. It eases into the end of the animation. Like it starts off a little slow, it then gets like a consistent speed, and then it slows down at the end. That's what this easing is. Now, there's different types of easing in JavaScript, and there is a page I was looking at before, Angular 2 easing, where you can specify all the different types. I'm just trying to remember where it is. Just give me a moment, guys. I'm going to pause the video and I'm going to find the document for you. Hey guys, I'm back. So I found it. Basically, it's called cubic-bezier.com. I'll put the link in the description. But basically, what it is it allows you to define the different kinds of easings. And the one that we were just looking at, where it gets off to a bit of a slow start and then basically comes to a slow end, was the ease option, which I just had in my code here. Okay. The other one by default is linear. So if you don't specify an easing, the animation goes at a consistent rate. Right. Ease in is one that allows you to get off to a little bit of a slow start, but then it speeds up and goes at a consistent rate after that. Ease out is the opposite. It starts off at a consistent rate and slows up at the end. And then ease in out is an even stronger version of ease, in the sense of it starts off quite slow, then it gets into a consistent flow, and then it kind of slows up again at the end. Okay, so we can actually look at these. This diagram over here allows us to create our own easing version using this cubic-bezier, which is also supported in Angular 2. So, for example, what I'll do is I'll let go with the consistent one I've got at the moment, which is the ease option. Right, you can see it's pretty fast. We can actually increase the duration here, so we can see what's going on over a longer period of time, say 6 seconds. So if I click go now, you'll see that it gets off to a faster start and then it slows up at the end. And this is using the ease option. So the pink one matches this graph, the green one matches these options down here. So if I click on ease for green, this is going to be very similar to the pink one up here. If I click go, at least I thought it was, clearly it's not. But anyway, it is what it is. But you can verify, you can create your own version here by understanding this graph. So how it works is that on the X plane here, you've got time, and on the Y plane, you've got how far it's progressed in the animation, right? So if your animation, you want it to go fast for the first, let's say 75%, right? You want it to get there really, really quickly, then basically you will move this up to the point where you're about 75%, right? So about here somewhere, and then you'll even bring this one up and over even more. So until they match up in this corner here, right? So therefore, you're going really, really quickly over a short period of time here for the first 75%, and then it really goes slow as it curves towards the end here. And you can flatten this out even more and bring this up even higher so that you'll get a very quick thing, then it will slow down a little bit, and then it will come to a very big crawl at the end. So let's have a look at this over the course of 6 seconds. So you'll see it gets off to a great start, and then it goes really, really, really slow at the end, right? And that's because we made it go off to a quick start and then get very, very slow. We can do it the other way, right? We can bring both of them down to this corner, to which it's very, very slow at the start, and then it speeds up very quickly at the end over the course of 6 seconds. All right, so if I click go on this, and then you'll see it's very, very slow at the start, and then as it gets towards the middle, bang. All right. Now they're a bit extreme. You know, normally you wouldn't create an easing of that standard. You do it somewhere in the middle here. So you might say, I want to have an easing that's, you know, a little bit slow at the start, but then I want it to, you know, speed up a little bit at the end. Or you might go, I want it to kind of slow up at the start and the end a little bit, and do something like that. And this is something you might see more as an interesting animation, where the animation starts off a little slow, then it warms up, and then it slows down again. And that might be a consistent flow for you. But the point to take away of this is that this cubic-bezier thing, this number up here, this you can use in Angular 2. So I can copy this, and I can actually paste this as part of the easing calculation here. Right? And when I do the animation in my example, what you're going to see is exactly the kind of thing here, where it starts off a little slow, then it takes off a bit, and then it slows up at the end. Okay. Now I've got the duration still for 5 seconds here with a 1 second delay. I might get rid of the 1 second delay just so you guys can see this better. And we'll see how it works with the actual login form. So I'm coming back over to the login form. We'll refresh the screen. Now I'm going to click login. So you see it slowly get off to the start, then it warms up a bit, and then it slows down at the end. Right? Now this might be better if we go back to our 150% translation. So we'll do that. And we'll click here, and you can see it starts to slide, speeds up a bit, and then slows up at the end. Alright, I'm going to leave it like that for now. I'm going to reduce the time that it takes to do that down to a second. just a better way to do it. And that should look quite nice, I think, as an easing for the animation. So now it floats away, okay? So that's the completed state, and it looks pretty good. But now what we wanted to do is we want the login screen to basically, when there's something that hasn't been entered here, or it's been entered incorrectly, I'm going to make it shake, right? Like shake backwards and forwards. And you may have seen this in mobile phone applications. We can do this in Angular too. So let's do it. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use keyframes for this. So how do we create keyframes? Well, it's also using this animate function, but instead of specifying just the duration, you actually specify a number of different transforms over a period of time. So for example, I want to transition from, let's say, unchecked to invalid. So we're going to put it in invalid state. I'm going to animate, and we'll say over the course of 500 milliseconds. Yeah, we won't specify anything else right now. We're gonna do these keyframes. Okay. So to do keyframes in Angular 2, we just need to include a function called keyframes, like so. And then this is just a function which takes an array. All right. Like so. And I forgot to put the function parentheses here. And as a result, I have not put it there. That's better. So what goes inside this array? Essentially, it's a set of animations, very similar to what we do when we just want to animate styles. So we just go style, right? And inside the style, what do we want to do? Well, for the purpose of this particular shake, we're just going to be doing transforms of translations in the X direction. So for the first part, I'm going to say, let's translate negative 10%. Right, so that's the first one. Then I want to go from 10%, I want to move over in the opposite direction to 10%, then back to 10%, and then 10% again. Right, that seems feasible. Over the course of 500 milliseconds, that's 125 milliseconds each, where we translate from its current position to negative 10%. So it will go 10% to the left, then it will move its way probably 20% over to the right, so that it's 10% from its original position. Right? Then it will go 20% to the left again to get negative 10% of its original position, and then finally another 20% over to the right, so that it's 10% to the right of its original position. Now, this might seem a little confusing at first, but once you get the hang of this, it's actually not so bad. Now, what I'm going to do quickly here is I'm going to put this login screen in an invalid state now, just so we can test out the animation. So after doing all this, we now just have to come over to the code, we click this, and now we can see it's shaking. But it doesn't work after this, alright? Why does it not work after I click it the second time? Well, let's think about it. We're no longer unchecked, we're now invalid. This only happens when unchecked, when you go from unchecked to invalid, right? So how do we get back to unchecked here? This is where we can use something called a callback. Okay, so in Angular 2, you can provide two sets of callbacks on your component. So along with the animation you support, you can have events here. So we can go at login screen animation dot, I think it's, just trying to remember, I think it's end or stop. Just let me check this for a second. It's done. Sorry, so on done. So this is when the animation is completed. The other option is start, I believe, but we're not going to be using that in this video. But the other one's start, this one's done. So on this, we can call a function. And I'm just going to go set back to unchecked. And you can guess what that function's going to do. It's pretty straightforward, I would think. So we come down, we create a function called set back to unchecked. And as a result, I'm going to set this back to unchecked. Alright, so at the end of the animation, we're back to unchecked. So now, when we click submit multiple times, it's going to continue to shake. So let's quickly check that. So refresh. So if I click login, it shakes. Click login again, it shakes. And it just continues to shake, right? So that's good, that's what we want. Like, based on there's been some error, which we haven't written the logic for that yet, but you get the point, right? So I want to speed up this stuff up just a little bit. It's still a little too slow, so we'll make it 250 now. So it should be double the speed now. That looks a little better. Cool. So the last thing we need to do is on submit, we need to verify when we should be in a valid and an invalid state based on the submission of the form. Now, normally you would check the validation of the form, so you put in like, you know, required fields and you know, all that other stuff we did a long way back. But to be honest with you, this is not what this video is about. So I just want to quickly show you how we can just determine the differences between the two. So I'm going to go if this dot username and this dot username dot length. So we're checking the length. In fact, I should say trim dot length is greater than, let's say, how many characters for username? We'll say 6. No, we'll say 5. You have to have a username that's higher than 5, and we got a password, and the password is also above. This dot password dot trim dot length is also above 5 characters. So they both have to be 6 characters long for you to pass. We're going to set it to valid, else we're going to set it to invalid. So pretty straightforward here. We're just going to put that inside the else, indicating that we're invalid. And then up here, we're just going to put the valid option. Okay, so we come in and we're going to set it to completed. Cool. So hopefully now, by this point, we've got ourselves a form that if we put in the data, it's less than 5 characters for either username and password, or there's nothing at all, we're going to get the shake. Otherwise, if we put the data in completely, the login screen is going to slide to the right and disappear. And I think that's going to be the end case for this particular video. So let's quickly check this. So refresh. So as a result, if I don't put anything in there and I click login, it just shakes, right? Same with the password. I put nothing in there, it just shakes. If I put in Daryl, which is exactly 5 characters, which is not enough, and then Daryl for the password, it's still going to shake, okay, because we're still outside. If I put Daryl A, so that's now 6, still shakes because password is 5. If I put the A at the end for the password, bingo, see you later. And interestingly, it came back, and I know why. So one more thing we needed to do. This particular animation here is fired. This done is fired regardless of whether you're valid or invalid, right? So whether you're completed or invalid, and it's setting it back to unchecked for both scenarios. The only thing is we only want to set it back to unchecked if we're invalid. We don't want to send back to unchecked if we're completed. So just a quick little if condition here. If this dot login blah blah triple equals invalid. Alright, whoops. We're just going to set this to unchecked. And that's all there is to it. Save that, come back over, check this one more time. It's currently invalid, it just shakes. It comes back to its default screen. I'll put in Darrell A in both positions to get it valid. Log in. And the screen disappears, and that's the end of the story, okay? So that's it for this video. I know I've mentioned a lot here in terms of animation and all the different states and how you can use keyframes to build up a shake screen here. And I've also mentioned about this easing and how we can create our own easings using cubic-bezier. Now, just so you know, the easings that you can support in Angular 2 are these 5 right here, in terms of just writing it. So we can come in here, we can just write linear, like so, and that's just going to do, you know, a basic, if I do this right again, that's hiding, but it's just going to disappear in a linear fashion, and that's not what we want. I'll put it back to what it was, but basically just understand that the options here are what you can use outside of this cubic-bezier function. So that's it for this video. I think we're going to move on from basically all this animation stuff. In the next video, we're probably going to look at parallel animations, so 2 things happening at the same time. And potentially as part of that video, we'll also look at doing transitions when using routes. And I think that will end up the animation session for us. So I'll see you in the next video.